Dudes to Dads, brought to you by Dad University, is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying. And we are back.
We are back.
I'm Jason Kreidman.
I'm Alan Bush.
And this is Dudes to Dads, episode 166.
Yeah. We're up there.
Did I count that right?
You did count it right. I think we were. It comes right after 165. Correct?
It does, and before 167, and we will do that next.
Okay, great.
How are you this week?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah,
everything's good.
Things are good. Yeah,
little late recording here, but
no, it's always good. Spry.
We've got interesting topic, which I know you are a big fan of.
Yeah,
love, because you got the voice.
I got the voice for love.
This one is unconditional love versus conditional love. Uh-huh. So a little bit deeper.
Yeah,
if you can go that a little deeper on the voice. I don't know if you can. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the topic of love and specifically how important unconditional love is for our kids versus conditional love. And sometimes this is, I say unconditional and then unconscious or subconscious, not unconscious. It's subconscious.
I love it when I'm knocked out.
Yeah. So
sleeping. Unconditional
love means that you love someone regardless of what they do. It can mean, regardless of what they do for you, how they act, what happens, whatever, you give them love.
Okay.
Regardless. And that's what we're striving for with kids. Conditional love typically means we require someone to be a certain way, do certain things in order for us to love them.
Right.
So when you were growing up, Alan, did you feel like you had unconditional love?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't like a quote unquote bad kid, but I knew if I made mistakes, as kind of what we talked about last episode, or had issues with certain problems and certain things, then I didn't feel like I'd be rejected because of it. I mean, of course, you have those little fears here and there, but especially in hindsight, I realized that I had what I would consider unconditional love from my parental units and my grandparents and people that were my immediate family, I would say. Yeah.
So there wasn't the feeling like if you didn't act a certain way or or do something in school or whatever that you may not be as loved.
Right. Yeah. They always encouraged good behavior and they, try to, make sure that you're doing the right thing. And if I made a mistake or whatever, or if I needed help with something, they'd at least make an attempt to try to understand it.
Right.
At least I think, and I think probably some people more than others, but I never felt any of them didn't have
feel
that
unloved.
Right. Didn't feel unloved. Or I had conditions.
For myself, there's circumstances that I recall, which I'm sure a ton of kids do, where you feel like you needed to make a specific choice or do something, or your parents would get mad, or even worse, you might feel like they won't love you.
Right.
But I recall with my parents that there was many, many conversations or many, many statements to the effect of, we will love you regardless of anything.
Right.
Like they said that statement many, many times, whether I believed it because of my own issues.
Yeah. And that's a great point to bring up, is that sometimes your own issues become part of the equation. If they're really exhibiting that behavior,
right,
but you're insecure about it, or you really don't think that they mean it, that can also kind of cloud your judgment.
Well, and I think sometimes we mix it love with approval.
Yeah.
So there's some like confusion of that.
Yeah,
and I knew that my parents really valued, good grades and doing well in school and making good decisions and those kinds of things. But they always were very specific in saying like, hey, we love you unconditionally no matter what. But it is weird how I recall not thinking that in some way, weird way, like, well, the decision of where I decide to go to college or how I perform in the sport or something. And I think as kids, I don't know how that shaped specifically.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that their actions were different than their words.
Right.
I did always feel loved. Like even if we lost something or I did bad, like my parents still cared.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get yelled at for getting a bad grade.
Right.
So it was interesting. It's interesting how that dynamic happens, but I'm sure it's like over time, you want to feel that unconditional love.
For sure.
And so, that's the bottom line of this entire thing, is that children need to feel that your love is unconditional. Mm-hmm. And as a parent, specifically father, we need to make sure that our child feels that way.
Right.
And I think it's not an easy thing to do. There's some things that we do and we shouldn't do. And here's a couple of them. And we shouldn't do them, or very rarely you should do them.
Right.
Something might be like withholding affection because they didn't do something correctly, mm-hmm. or that you asked.
Right.
And I can recall something like that, like where the child might say like, oh, give me a hug or something like that. And you're like, well, you didn't take the trash out, or like, maybe not that specific, but like where you do kind of withhold affection or love in some way because they're not compliant. Granted, hey, it's 2 hours past your bedtime. No, we're not going to sit here and snuggle for a half hour.
Yeah.
Like
I love you, but we're not doing
to sleep. That may not apply, but
right.
That's something you got to be mindful of. This is a big one, and I know I am guilty of this one, is letting their accomplishments or how they're acting or such affect your mood. Mm. So, this doesn't happen like when they win, you're happy. And if they lost, like at a sporting event or something, you are sad or mad. Mm-hmm. But there's certainly parents that do that.
Sure.
Like you played horrible. Like, how could you have played that? And they get upset at that, and they're physically, they're literally upset at the child for the way that they performed.
Yeah. And I guess could you be upset with the child? In some cases, the child is upset, so you feel a little.
No,
I'm not saying you should feel bad or literally feel sad, but I think that you work to try to cheer them up, or like, hey, don't feel down. You'll get them next time.
But that's different.
Yeah.
But that's different. You can be empathetic.
Yeah.
But you don't. Your mood dependent on their actions is bad. Mm. Ideally, we don't want to be affected by other people.
Yeah.
And we don't want to show them that the way that they do something affects us like that. Mm-hmm. It happens to everybody and it's impossible to avoid. But the fact that they're not listening to me gets me upset.
Right.
In a Zen perfect world, that wouldn't happen.
Well, of course not.
I shouldn't let my, calmness and my, I forget what the word is, my, sort of my well-being be determined by their actions.
Sure.
Like that's in a perfect world. It's not reality. But,
of course not, yeah.
But that's what happens.
Yeah.
So we get upset because they're not listening. Hey, I told you to do that, and then you get upset and it rolls on. So that's part of it, though, is to be mindful of that, of like, regardless, say, hey, well, you're not going to be able to do that. Like, it's not affecting my state of being. It's just, it affects you or what you get to do or whatever. Right. But like, I'm still going to be happy.
Right.
But when they start to see like how they do stuff affects how you feel and your mood and your affection, like that's when it starts becoming difficult.
Yeah. And I think that develops like manipulation patterns, kind of what we talked about last time. Yeah.
You're responsible for how I feel.
Right.
We do that with our spouses or something.
Yeah. And it's like
you're responsible for making me happy. Did you know that?
It's like, really? Oh,
yeah. And then, a big one is expecting them to be a way that they are not. And that example is maybe they're not good at a certain sport and you are getting really frustrated and upset because they're not good at it.
Right.
Like, same thing. That's conditional love. Like, no, I would be a lot happier and a lot more loving if you would have played well.
Right. Yeah.
Forget about win, lose, whatever. But like, if you would have played well, that would have been something. So it's those kinds of things to keep in mind. Like how think of, having conditional love is just not going to be healthy. There's no way around it.
Right.
So how can we display unconditional love? And that's more important rather than focus on the negative. We like to focus on the positive.
Sure.
So how do we do it? So here's one way. Say it clearly and repeatedly. So kind of like how my parents did, let them know that no matter what, you will love them. So they can fail a test. It has nothing to do with how you love them. And actually say that verbally. Like, they're studying for a test. It's like, listen, whether you fail or ace this test, it doesn't matter how much I love you. That doesn't affect how I love you.
Right.
So, and those kinds of things build up over time too. If you lose a game in sports, it doesn't affect you. Even when they lie and do something like that that's not good, be clear to them it doesn't affect how you love them.
Yep.
It's poor behavior.
Yeah.
It's not a good decision.
Yeah.
It's all these things, but it does not affect how you love them. And that's a really, really important thing for them to understand and for you to understand is that it doesn't matter. So that's the first one. Say it clearly and repeatedly. Second one, focus on the positive. So how do we do this? So there are some things that your child might be a little bit negative. So as an example, maybe your child, is really bossy. Like, you see them with friends and they're bossing people around or whatever. You might, take them aside at some point and say, hey, I see you really like to take charge of situations, And
putting it mildly, you like to take charge.
Yeah, you like to take charge. And this is going to help you in the future be a really good leader. So how can we cooperate, though, and work with others so that we give other people a chance to do things? Because we want to be fair to everybody, and then you're sort of explaining it in that way. So you're actually turning that negative, rather than telling them, God, you're so bossy all the time. You need to stop being bossy to your friend, because then they feel like you're judging them. And they feel it. Now, I would love feedback on this one because I know parents would argue. But we're talking utopian here.
Sure.
Like, we're talking in the perfect scenario. It's not always, nobody does this all the time.
Sure.
We're not talking about,
Yeah. You don't have to be perfect.
This is just, these are suggestions and nuggets to take to say, you know what? Maybe I can turn that difficulty that my child has, look at it in a positive way, show them that it's not bad, but it needs to be managed.
Right.
It's the same thing even with emotions. And we've talked about that extensively.
Sure.
It is okay and it's great to have emotion, but we need to learn how to manage it effectively. We need to be able to bounce back after being upset. We need to, be able to let out anger, but then control it. And there's other things, we sadness, all of those things. It's kind of the same thing. Let's focus on the positive. Let's allow that behavior to, maybe that behavior can sometimes happen, but we need to learn to manage it.
Yeah.
Number 3, listen and notice them. So you want to be sure to let them see and feel that you are listening to them. And, obviously one way to do that is through empathy. Being empathetic is going to allow them to feel like you're compassionate, you understand them, that you're hearing what they're saying, and that's going to be important. You want to regularly point out the things that you love about them,
right,
inside and out. Gosh, I just really love the way that you are nice to people. Now you need to be careful with something like that because you can be conditional.
Sure.
That can turn into conditional. Like, I love the way you do this or when you do this, but you're also doing that positive reinforcement, which is, and it was interesting when I was reading a lot about this, there was like a really fine line of like how much positive reinforcement to give.
Yeah.
Where it then turns into conditional love.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you kind of have to figure that out. You have to figure that out.
And that's where we get to that stage of like, how do you be positive and reinforce those good behaviors and not necessarily punish the negative behaviors, the things you don't like about them, and then tie that in with love. Because sometimes that the actions aren't necessarily indicative of love and how much you love that person. It's about,
Yeah, and you want to give them the attention.
It's about the behavior.
Right.
It's like, I love you regardless, but like, that's a really cool behavior.
Well, that's where
this is a really not cool behavior.
But see, that's where we mix up attention, I think, and love.
That's what I mean. And that's because what you said earlier is that you have to kind of understand that your positive reinforcement is about the behavior.
Right.
It's not whether or not you love them or not.
Right.
And I think that's it is a weird fine line. Yeah. But it is something to kind of stress out. It's like, I still want to feel good and make you feel good about yourself when you're doing awesome things.
Right.
And so that's still there, but if something's bad, and that's usually where it really turns into a quote unquote problem, is that when you're having those negative feelings, and it's like, well, it doesn't mean I'm going to love you any less. I'm just saying, hey, don't do that.
Right.
I'm not a fan of when you light things on fire.
Hey,
that's to harken back.
That's
earlier
2 episodes in a row you brought that up.
I got to bring it up. It's funny, but it is it's indicative of those things, and I think that it's important to distinguish, like you said earlier, the action doesn't necessarily mean the feeling behind it.
Right.
It's I don't know. It's really interesting to think. I'm trying to figure out how to really phrase that in a way that makes sense, but it doesn't. You have to kind of just go with it.
It's not easy.
Not easy at all.
Not everything we do is easy. And then the last thing, accept their faults and mistakes. So in the last episode, we talked about, what to do and how to handle mistakes. And I think that's a crucial piece to unconditional love.
Right.
Just crucial. And that's where you can bond with them, earn trust, all those kinds of things. You're not punishing them. You're trying to teach them how to do things correctly and take care of themselves.
Right.
And you're going to want to make sure that you forgive them when they make a mistake, that forgiveness is really important for unconditional love too. You can't hold grudges.
Right.
That doesn't help.
Right.
They need to know, like you just said, like that your love is not conditional based on them behaving correctly. That is behavioral approval, or such.
And you want to encourage that behavior,
right?
For sure.
So you want to encourage that behavior, but you need to balance that with, making sure that they know that it is the behavior, it's not them as a person,
right?
And just be very, very clear about that,
right?
So that's it.
That's it.
That's all I got.
That's all you need.
Yeah, I know. I need to go practice this stuff. That's why I write it down so I can practice.
Right.
If somebody has any questions, comments, feedback, what should they do, Alan?
They should email us, podcast@dudesadads.com, or hit us up on our many social media channels, Twitter @dudesadads, Facebook, dudesadads.com, YouTube, go to Dad University and Dudesadads with some really great info from Jason on there. And also please go to iTunes and or Stitcher and or Google Play and or wherever we're found, probably MySpace, Friendster, one of those. And wherever our podcast is seen, if there's a way to give us some approval and thumbs up, there. Then make sure you give us thumbs up, approval, and or 5-star rating, and leave a comment and subscribe to those channels, as it really helps perpetuate the show.
Hotbot.
Lycos.
Alta Vista. We should play a game with that. How many old search engines can you name?
I got a few in my sleeve.
We'll do that another episode.
Yeah.
I'm sure people will be very excited.
Well, I'm sure.
All right. Well, with that, Alan, thank you as always.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.